For months, Staff Sergeant Whitmore believed his daughter was safe at home, learning piano and doing homework. But when he stepped off that military transport and walked through the crowded downtown streets, what he saw made his blood freeze. There, in the middle of a busy intersection, a small girl in torn clothes was dancing frantically, while strangers threw coins at her feet. The moment she looked up and their eyes met, Maddox realized his worst nightmare had become reality. Maddox Mad Dog Whitmore had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, survived IED explosions, and led rescue missions in hostile territory. His hands had steadied under enemy fire, his voice had commanded respect from hardened soldiers, and his courage had earned him a Bronze Star. But nothing in his military career had prepared him for the sight of his 7-year-old daughter Ophelia, dancing like a trained animal for the entertainment of strangers. Standing 6'2" with weathered hands and steel-gray eyes, Maddox was the kind of man who spoke in measured tones and meant every word he said. His fellow soldiers called him Mad Dog, not for his temper, but for his relentless pursuit of mission objectives. He had joined the army at 18 and dedicated his life to protecting others. The irony wasn't lost on him that while he had been protecting strangers halfway around the world, he had failed to protect the person who mattered most. Chapter 3. The Angels Fall. Ophelia Whitmore had been born during a snowstorm in December, her arrival announced by thunder that shook the hospital windows. Her mother, Lieutenant Raven Whitmore, had died in a helicopter crash when Ophelia was just 2 years old. From that moment, it had been just father and daughter against the world. Before the deployment, Ophelia had been a bright, curious child who collected butterflies in jars and asked endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how airplanes stayed in the air. She had her mother's amber eyes and her father's stubborn streak. At 7, she could already read chapter books, played simple melodies on the piano, and had dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She had a way of tilting her head when she was thinking, just like her mother used to do. Maddox would find her in the garden, talking to the flowers as if they were old friends, creating elaborate stories about fairy kingdoms hidden beneath the rose bushes. Her laughter was pure music, the kind of sound that could heal any wound in his heart. The memory that haunted Maddox most was their last dance together. It had been a Saturday evening in their small kitchen, and an old Elvis song was playing on the radio. Ophelia had climbed onto his boots, her tiny hands gripping his fingers as he swayed back and forth. "Daddy, when you come back from the army, will you teach me to dance like a princess?" she had asked, her amber eyes sparkling with innocence. "Princess, I'll teach you to dance like a queen," he had promised, lifting her high into the air as she squealed with delight. They had spent countless evenings like that, him helping her with homework at the kitchen table, reading bedtime stories in funny voices, teaching her card tricks he'd learned from other soldiers. Their favorite ritual was Friday night pizza and old movies. Ophelia would curl up against his chest on the couch, asking questions about everything she saw on screen. "Why do the bad guys always lose, Daddy?" she had asked one night. "Because good always wins in the end, baby girl. Always." Those words now tasted like ash in his mouth. The call had come on a Tuesday morning in March. Maddox was in the garage, teaching Ophelia how to change a tire on her bike when his phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, official, and completely indifferent to the fact that it was about to shatter a little girl's world. "Staff Sergeant Whitmore, you're being deployed to Forward Operating Base Chapman. Departure date is April 15th. Duration, 18 months. 18 months. The words hit him like shrapnel. He looked at Ophelia, who was carefully following his instructions with the wrench, her tongue poking out in concentration. How could he tell her that her daddy was leaving again? That night, after Ophelia had gone to bed, Maddox sat at his kitchen table with a pile of paperwork and a decision that would haunt him forever. As a single father in the military, he needed to designate a guardian for Ophelia during his deployment. His parents were dead, his brother lived overseas, and his sister had her own family struggles. Then he remembered Monica Ashworth. Monica Ashworth seemed like a godsend. She was a friend of a friend, a recent widow who had worked as a children's counselor before her husband's death. She lived in a beautiful suburban home with a white picket fence and a garden full of flowers. When Maddox met her, she spoke eloquently about child development and had glowing references from previous families she had helped. Children need stability during traumatic periods, Monica had said, her voice warm and professional. I understand the unique challenges faced by military families. I lost my husband in Iraq, so I know the sacrifice you're making. She had seemed genuinely fond of Ophelia during their meetings, bringing small gifts and engaging her in conversations about school and hobbies. Ophelia, still young enough to be won over by kindness and presence, had warmed to Monica quickly.
She's nice, Daddy, Ophelia had said after their third meeting. She said she'll teach me to bake cookies.
The paperwork was flawless. Monica had a clean background check, excellent references, and a house that passed all safety inspections. Social services approved the arrangement without hesitation. The last night before deployment, Maddox tucked Ophelia into bed and promised to call every week. He left detailed instructions for Monica about Ophelia's routines, her favorite foods, her bedtime stories, and her fears. He thought he was leaving his daughter with someone who would love her almost as much as he did. He couldn't have been more wrong. Monica's transformation began the moment Maddox's plane left American airspace. The warm smiles vanished, replaced by cold calculation. The gentle voice became sharp and commanding. The woman who had promised to treat Ophelia like her own daughter revealed her true nature with terrifying speed. Listen carefully, little girl, Monica said, her voice devoid of the warmth Ophelia remembered. Your daddy is gone, and I'm in charge now. We're going to have some new rules. The first rule was silence. Ophelia was not allowed to speak unless spoken to. The second rule was obedience. Any questioning or hesitation would result in punishment. The third rule was the most insidious. Everything that happened in the house was their special secret. If you tell anyone about our games, Monica warned, something terrible will happen to your daddy. The army will be very angry with him, and they might never let him come home. For a 7-year-old who had already lost her mother, the threat of losing her father was enough to ensure compliance. Ophelia learned to swallow her words, to hide her tears, and to endure whatever Monica demanded. The dancing started as a game. Monica told Ophelia that her father needed extra money for his military equipment and that they could help by earning some cash. She taught Ophelia simple dance moves, praising her natural grace and rhythm. At first it seemed innocent enough, but innocence has a way of dying quickly in the hands of evil. The first time Monica took Ophelia to the street corner, she presented it as an adventure. They were going to surprise Daddy by earning money for a special welcome home party. Ophelia, still believing in the goodness of adults, trusted Monica's explanation. The corner of 5th and Main Street was chosen strategically. It was a busy intersection where commuters waited for traffic lights, where business people grabbed coffee from the nearby cafe, where families passed on their way to the park. It provided maximum visibility and maximum profit. Monica dressed Ophelia in deliberately shabby clothes, a torn dress that was too small, scuffed shoes with no socks, hair left deliberately messy. The contrast between Ophelia's natural beauty and her pitiful appearance was designed to tug at heartstrings and open wallets. Remember, Monica whispered as she positioned Ophelia on the corner. Dance like Daddy taught you, but bigger, smile big, and when people throw money, you say thank you and curtsy. The music came from Monica's phone, tinny and distorted through the small speaker. As Ophelia began to dance, her movements were tentative, confused. This wasn't like dancing with Daddy in the kitchen. This felt wrong, exposed, shameful. But the coins started falling almost immediately. People walking by were moved by the sight of a beautiful child dancing with such obvious skill, but apparent poverty. They assumed she was performing to help her family, perhaps to buy food or pay rent. Their generosity was born from compassion, but it fed a monster they couldn't see. A businessman in an expensive suit dropped a $20 bill and smiled at Ophelia's curtsy. A group of college students pooled their change and cheered her on. A grandmother with tears in her eyes gave her a 10 and whispered, "You're very talented, sweetheart." Each act of kindness unknowingly contributed to Ophelia's degradation. By the end of the first day, they had collected nearly $200. Monica counted the money with satisfaction, while Ophelia sat exhausted in the car, her feet bleeding from dancing on concrete in shoes that didn't fit. "You did very well," Monica said, but there was no warmth in her praise. "Tomorrow we'll do even better." As days turned into weeks, Ophelia became a fixture at the intersection. The morning commuters began to recognize her, some setting aside change specifically for the dancing girl. But familiarity bred dangerous complacency. Jake Morrison, the barista at the corner coffee shop, watched Ophelia dance every day through the large windows. He noticed that she seemed tired, that her clothes were always the same torn dress, that she never seemed to eat or drink anything during her hours-long performances. Something nagged at him, but he told himself it wasn't his business. Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, who lived in the apartment building across the street, developed a routine of watching Ophelia from her third-floor window. She could see that the child danced for hours without breaks, that her guardian, a well-dressed woman who sat in a car nearby, never interacted with her except to collect money. Eleanor thought about calling someone, but what would she say? Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatrician whose office was 2 blocks away, occasionally saw Ophelia during her lunch walks. As a medical professional, she recognized signs of exhaustion and stress in the child's posture and movements, but she rationalized what she saw. Street performance wasn't uncommon in the city. The most heartbreaking witness was Tommy Chen, Dr. Chen's 8-year-old son, who begged his mother to let him give Ophelia his allowance money. "She looks sad, Mommy," he said. "Even when she's smiling, she looks sad in her eyes." Children, it seemed, could see what adults chose to ignore. 6,000 miles away, Maddox was fighting his own battle against a growing sense of dread. His video calls with Ophelia, scheduled for every Sunday at 3 p.m. local time, had become exercises in confusion and heartbreak. The child on the screen looked like his daughter, but something fundamental had changed. Ophelia's bright chatter had been replaced by monosyllabic responses. Her spontaneous questions and silly jokes had disappeared. She sat rigidly in front of the camera, her hands folded in her lap, answering his questions with the mechanical precision of a trained animal. "How was school today, baby girl?" "Fine, Daddy." "What did you learn?" "Reading and math, Daddy." "Are you eating well? Is Monica taking good care of you?" "Yes, Daddy. Monica is very nice to me." But her eyes told a different story. The sparkle was gone, replaced by a flatness that made Maddox's stomach churn. She looked tired, thinner, and there was something in her expression he had never seen before: fear. Monica always hovered just off camera during these calls, and Maddox could sometimes see her shadow moving in the background. When he asked to speak with Monica directly, she would appear with her warm smile and reassuring words about Ophelia's progress and happiness. "She's just adjusting to a new routine," Monica would explain. "Children sometimes become quiet when they miss their parents, but she's doing wonderfully." The words were right, but something felt wrong. Maddox's instincts, honed by years of combat and survival, screamed that his daughter was in danger. But how could he prove it? How could he act on a feeling when he was thousands of miles away? The breaking point came during a call in late September. Ophelia appeared on screen with what looked like exhaustion etched into her young face. When Maddox asked about a bruise on her arm, both Ophelia and Monica explained it as a playground accident. But the explanation felt rehearsed, and Ophelia's eyes darted nervously to someone off-camera throughout the conversation. After the call ended, Maddox sat in his barracks, staring at the black screen of his laptop. Around him, other soldiers were writing letters home, playing cards, cleaning weapons. The normal sounds of military life continued, but for Maddox, everything had stopped. He thought about his promise to protect others, about his duty to his country, about the mission his unit was completing. Then he thought about Ophelia's eyes, about the daughter who used to dance on his feet and ask questions about everything, about the child who now sat like a broken doll in front of a camera. There was no choice to make. That night, Maddox requested emergency leave citing a family crisis. When his commanding officer denied the request, Maddox made a decision that would end his military career, but might save his daughter's life. Staff Sergeant Whitmore went AWOL. The journey home took 36 hours of planes, layovers, and desperate prayers. Maddox landed at Denver International Airport with nothing but his military duffel bag and a heart full of dread. He didn't call Monica to announce his arrival. Something told him that surprise was his only ally. He took a taxi straight to the city center, telling the driver to drop him at 5th and Main Street, the address where Monica had claimed to take Ophelia for fun outings to see the city. The taxi pulled away, leaving Maddox standing on a busy sidewalk as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the intersection. The sounds of the city washed over him. Car horns, conversations, the general hum of urban life. He was scanning the area, looking for any sign of Monica's car, when he heard it. Music, tinny, distorted music coming from a cell phone speaker. He turned toward the sound and felt his world collapse. There, in the center of the intersection's pedestrian island, was his daughter. She wore a torn pink dress that hung loosely on her thin frame. Her hair was tangled and unwashed, and her feet were bare and dirty. She was dancing, if the mechanical, exhausted movements could be called dancing, while people walked by and threw coins into a small basket at her feet. But it was her face that broke him. Ophelia's expression was blank, empty, as if she had retreated so far inside herself that only her body remained to perform this humiliating ritual. She moved to the beat of the music like a wind-up toy, her small frame swaying and spinning with practiced precision, but no joy, no life, no spark of the little girl who used to dance in their kitchen. Maddox watched as a businessman dropped a $5 bill into the basket and smiled at Ophelia as if he were doing her a favor. He watched as a group of teenagers laughed and took selfies with his daughter performing in the background. He watched as his little girl, his baby, his princess, his whole world, curtsied to strangers who had no idea they were watching a child being tortured in plain sight. As if sensing his presence, Ophelia looked up during one of her turns. Their eyes met across the busy intersection, and Maddox saw the exact moment recognition flickered in her gaze. Her mechanical movements faltered, the blank expression cracked, and for just an instant, he saw his real daughter again, scared, exhausted, and desperate. "Daddy!" The word was barely a whisper, but it carried across the noise of the traffic and hit Maddox like a physical blow. Maddox moved through the intersection like a man possessed, dodging cars and ignoring the honking horns and shouted curses of drivers. Nothing mattered except reaching his daughter. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare as the tall man in military fatigues pushed through the crowd with single-minded determination. When he reached Ophelia, she was standing frozen in the center of the pedestrian island, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. The music continued to play from the phone, an obscene soundtrack to their reunion. "Daddy, you came back," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Maddox dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms, feeling how thin she had become, how her small body trembled against his chest. "I'm here, baby girl. Daddy's here. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again." The coins scattered as Maddox kicked over the basket, sending quarters and bills flying across the concrete. Around them, curious onlookers began to gather, some pulling out their phones to record the scene. But Maddox didn't care who was watching. His daughter was safe in his arms, and that was all that mattered. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Where's Monica?" Ophelia pointed with a shaking hand toward a silver sedan parked half a block away. Through the windshield, Maddox could see a woman frantically talking on her phone, her eyes wide with panic as she watched him holding Ophelia. "Please don't leave me again," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please, Daddy." She said if I was bad, you'd never come home. She said the army would keep you forever if I told anyone about our games. The words hit Maddox like physical blows. His daughter had been terrorized into silence, convinced that her father's safety depended on her compliance with Monica's sick demands. "Listen to me, Ophelia," Maddox said, kneeling down again and taking her face gently in his hands. "None of this was your fault. None of it. You are not bad, you didn't do anything wrong, and Daddy is never leaving you again. Do you understand me?" Ophelia nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Within 20 minutes, the intersection was swarming with police, social workers, and paramedics. Monica was arrested on charges of child endangerment, exploitation, and fraud. As she was led away in handcuffs, she made one final attempt at manipulation. "She's lying if she told you I hurt her," Monica called out. Children make things up all the time, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jake's videos showed hours of Ophelia dancing in various weather conditions. Dr. Chen's medical examination revealed signs of malnutrition, dehydration, and chronic stress. Most damning of all was Monica's own phone, which contained text messages discussing rates for special requests involving Ophelia's dancing. The case became a media sensation. Save Ophelia began trending on social media, as videos of her rescue spread across the internet. Monica's trial began 8 months after her arrest. The prosecution presented devastating evidence, including financial records showing she had collected over $30,000 from Ophelia's performances. The courtroom was packed when Ophelia testified. Despite her young age, she spoke clearly about her experiences. "She told me that Daddy needed money for his army work," Ophelia said, her small voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "She said if I didn't dance good enough, the bad guys might hurt Daddy because he wouldn't have the right equipment. I was scared, so I danced even when my feet hurt and when people laughed at me." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. Monica Ashworth was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for child exploitation, fraud, and multiple counts of child endangerment. The military, responding to public pressure, allowed Maddox to accept a medical discharge rather than face court-martial. He received full veterans benefits and was able to focus entirely on helping his daughter heal. Ophelia struggled with nightmares, anxiety, and a deep-seated fear of being separated from her father. She flinched when strangers approached her, couldn't bear the sound of music playing from phone speakers, and had panic attacks whenever she saw groups of people gathered together. But slowly, with the help of specialized therapists who understood trauma in military families, both father and daughter began to rebuild their relationship and their lives. The breakthrough came 6 months after the trial, when Ophelia asked if she could learn to dance again. Real dancing, not the mechanical performances Monica had forced her to do. "I want to dance like we used to, Daddy," she said one evening, in the kitchen, with the music we like. They started slowly, just swaying together to soft music in their living room. Gradually, as Ophelia's confidence grew, they began taking proper dance lessons together at a local studio. The instructor, Maria Santos, was a former professional dancer who specialized in working with trauma survivors. "Dancing should make your heart happy," Maria told Ophelia during their first lesson. "If it ever makes you sad or scared, we stop. You're in control here." Slowly, Ophelia began to rediscover the joy of movement, but her favorite moments were still the quiet ones at home, dancing with her father to old songs while they cooked dinner together. 2 years after the trial, Maddox and Ophelia stood backstage at the Centennial Theater, preparing for Ophelia's first public dance performance since her rescue. She had chosen to participate in a charity recital, benefiting organizations that support exploited children, wanting to use her story to help others. Ophelia wore a beautiful lavender costume that she had helped select, her hair arranged in an elegant bun with flowers that matched her dress. She looked every inch the princess her father had always told her she was. But more importantly, she looked like a child who was choosing to dance because it brought her joy. "Are you nervous, baby girl?" Maddox asked, adjusting the flowers in her hair with gentle fingers. "A little," Ophelia admitted, "but it's good nervous, like excited nervous." She had grown in the past 2 years, not just physically, but emotionally. The hollow-eyed child who had danced mechanically on street corners was gone, replaced by a vibrant 9-year-old who laughed easily, asked endless questions again, and dreamed of becoming a dance teacher someday. As the curtain rose and Ophelia took her position center stage, Maddox watched from the wings with tears in his eyes. The music began, not the tinny, distorted sounds from a phone speaker, but rich orchestral music that filled the theater with beauty. Ophelia began to dance, her movements flowing and graceful, filled with the joy and freedom that Monica had tried to steal from her. She spun and leaped and expressed herself through movement that was entirely her own choice, her own creation, her own art. The audience, many of whom knew her story, watched in appreciative silence. But for Maddox, the only sound that mattered was his daughter's quiet laughter as she danced, the sound of pure happiness that he had thought he might never hear again. When the performance ended and Ophelia took her bow, the theater erupted in applause. But she only had eyes for her father, who stepped onto the stage and lifted her high in the air just like he used to do in their kitchen all those years ago. "I'm so proud of you, princess," he whispered in her ear as the audience continued to cheer. "I did it, Daddy," she whispered back. "I danced because I wanted to, not because someone made me." The little girl who had once been forced to dance for coins on a street corner was now dancing for joy on a stage, reclaiming not just her art but her childhood, her dignity, and her right to choose her own steps in the dance of life. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign soil, but in the streets of our own communities, in the lives of the most vulnerable among us. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not defeating an enemy across the world, but saving the person who matters most, right here at home.